Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio. And apparently we've been resonating with several members of the nation with the last couple of episodes that we've had, because we've kind of tried this route of we're diving into a topic that's coming from a member of the nation that emails in at feedback@sexymarriageradio.com. And then we talk about why that continues to happen, why that's a component of a marriage. The one that's ringing true today is the "I know he loves me, but," which we kind of did a little sideline on. Even got emails from both members of the people that had sent in the questions that we talked about on some of the complexities of their marriage to try to give a little more rounding out of the story.
Okay, a little more color.
But today what we're doing is diving into this idea of what's the difference between love and action. Or more aptly stated is, how is love in action?
If we truly love,
that should elicit some sort of action and be seen and on display, not just an emotion. And so today, where we're going to jump into in the regular version is, what does that actually look like? Why is that so problematic? Why do we settle for the "I know he loves me, but" in some instances? And then the extended content, which is deeper, longer, and there's no ads, you can subscribe at smr.fm/academy. We're going to talk about what are some of the questions we can ask ourselves to be able to confront a situation better, to really start to recognize our own instances where I do this, because I can absolutely do this, where I don't have an action that's associated with my words. Or how do I confront it better in my marriage? How do I do that?
Right. Kind of gets to the best intentions, but
it's funny you should say that, because we actually have a episode back in the archives, episode 475, which is intention or action.
Okay.
And we dive into there on the idea of intention's not enough, which then begs the question, is love enough?
Love is always enough. That one's clear. I got words on that one. Yes.
Well, fair.
We got truth in that one.
That is true. But how does love display?
Yeah.
Because that's where we get into the deeper parts of this dynamic. And so all that's coming up right after this. So here's the email that came in that says, "Hey, Corey and Pam, I just finished listening to the last episode, and I'm sitting here having one of those, well, crap moments where you realize you've been caught red-handed doing exactly the thing you just heard described." I mean, that's that whole, how many times have I had, I'm listening to something going, that's me. This happens when I read books. Some of the different books that start meddling.
I was going to say your words usually are, now you're meddling.
Yes, now you're meddling into my world. So you know that phrase, "I know he loves me, but," that's what she continues on, that the emailer used. Yeah, the one that made me both pause and go, wait a minute. I think that little phrase may well as be the participation trophy of marriage. It sounds nice and it makes me feel better, but it's actually not, but it might not actually mean what I think it means. And honestly, I think I'm walking around with this phrase as an emotional security blanket without realizing I'm basically gaslighting myself. There's an interesting thing to look at a little deeper, possibly. So here's my response. Here's my request. Could you please do an entire episode dedicated to calling me out on this "I know he loves me, but" nonsense? Because I think I need you to be the friend who lovingly but firmly grabs me by the shoulders and says, "Honey, no, just no. Thanks for not letting me off the hook, even when I really, really want you guys to. Cheers."
So I have to admit, I'm a little bit confused by this email.
Okay.
Are they saying they're the ones that don't treat the other person consistently, or they're the ones, I know he loves me, but okay.
I'm reading it as that one. Where we'll go is with both in some ways.
Okay.
Right. But I'm reading it as that one where there's an element of, I'm starting to see this as there are markers that aren't helpful in what I say I want in my marriage versus what I'm getting in my marriage. And I'm not willing to look at them. And the way we pawn those things off oftentimes is that, "I know he loves me. I know she loves me. I know she's doing the best she can." All these kinds of things, because we will give benefit of the doubt in marriage, but sometimes it's to our own and our marriage's detriment, because you have to ask some more pointed questions about, what does that exactly mean? If I know they love me, well, okay, how? But that's kind of where we were last week. How does that happen? How do we get caught up in that dynamic that creates a huge dilemma for us. And so where I want to jump in.
Okay, I was going to say, and how? Where are we diving into
Great
this?
question.
Thank you.
So this is where we get into the fantasy versus the reality, which we all can tend to fall into this trap of the idealized versus what's my reality.
Okay.
Right. And it's and I don't.
We're not talking sexual fantasy here. We're just talking
life and relationship fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we all come into marriage with an idealized thing, right? This idealized spouse. This is that proverbial, I'll change them. You know, there's these things when I noticed when we were dating, but when we get married, I'll be able to change them. And it's not necessarily a conscious choice, but there's this thought process of that won't be a big deal. It'll be fine. Like I know their family history is going to be real rough, but we'll figure it out. It'll be okay.
It won't be a problem.
And that's
for
the
us.
idealized.
Okay, so I would say it's a combo. There's the people that think they're going to change their spouse, and then there's the people who don't. Maybe they didn't date long enough to get into some of those details.
They don't
right?
know.
They were still a little bit in the honeymoon phase of just even getting to know each other, and didn't see a lot of the things that end up popping up later as you are deeper in a relationship.
And then here's how this plays out if we get into more of the nitty gritty of this on a day-to-day basis, because this is obviously you can look at this, Pam, as a continuation or on a continuum, right? There's times where it gets really, really up high and it's pretty severe of I am being run around behind my back. I'm being lied to repeatedly. There is stuff that's incredibly shady going on financially. Right. But yet I'll try to make sense of it with the basis of this. Well, I know they're just, and I give excuses for things. And so I'm giving excuses for really bad behavior. But it also exists on the smaller scale of the continuum, which is important to realize. This is just the dynamic of I want the way I want it to be versus who is the person I'm actually in a relationship with. Because nobody is 100% perfect and coming from 100% goodness 100% of the time, right?
That's a lot of 100%.
It is.
Okay.
But it's realizing that I get caught in this trap of I have this known of our relationship, and there could be some chronic things that are happening, but at least it's known. And so therefore, if I'm going to confront the idealized and the fantasy, it's going to disrupt things. And so a lot of times I don't want to bring this up because I just don't want the fight. I don't want the tension. I don't want the dynamic and how it throws us off a bit, because it just becomes more problematic. Because a lot of times the way this can play out is I could bring up something to you, and when we're not at our best, when we've been in our history of our relationship, when we've had these moments and seasons that we're not at our best, there's more of a price to pay than just that moment, because it's going to disrupt some things for quite a while. And there will be tension and undercurrent shots and reactivities and different aspects of how these things play out. And so a lot of times it's like, I just don't have the energy. And so I'll just kind of let stuff slide. Don't say anything. Don't address it. And so I keep the fantasy going because it's a strategy to maintain a relative stability in the marriage.
I mean, is it kind of self-preservation?
And it can also be relationship preservation, because there can be a part of us that realizes, wow, this could be really, really volatile. If
really
I bring
detrimental.
This up. Right. This could be really problematic. And we got kids about to enter into a different stage. In the financial side of things, there's too much risk if we actually had to start dividing a household, because we get caught in, if I make these moves, man, it can lead towards, do we survive? Which then makes us back off. And that's just the reality. I'm not prescribing anything here. It's just a description of that is the reality in which we are in. And so when I start looking at how do I really face the realities of things and what this might cost me in comfort, consistency, pattern, whatever, that's where I get caught in. How do I really start to address things that are tangibly demonstrated? Because love, to set the stage, I think that's important to input here, is Love is most tangibly demonstrated in some sort of action, even if it's a regular saying of the words or words that are leaning towards that. That's still an action. You know someone is into you because there's actions that align with that, that show that. They're willing to go out of their way for things. They're willing to give up on something and not hold you responsible or hostage for the choice. And they're willing to show tangible ways. And so here Dr. Schnarch puts it, love without behavior is sentimentality, not intimacy. And that's an important thing, is to start looking at what are the behaviors.
Yeah, they have to be tied together, especially when you're talking about a marriage relationship. If I'm someone that says, I know he loves me, but then we're not just talking about one instance where something went awry or I wasn't paid attention
Right? These are
to.
behaviors that have been repeated and seen over time. It's not one-offs.
Yeah, if I'm throwing in the but, then it's a big deal. And it's something to pay attention to, not only for your own self-worth, but for a potential of a more vibrant relationship going forward, and for a legacy you're going to leave.
What's being modeled?
What is being
because
modeled?
people pick up on, they watch. I mean, every one of us can think of couples in our friend orbit that we have, that you just know they're into each other. You just know they love each other. You can see it. And it's not what they're saying, it's how they act around each other. It's how they make decisions towards each other.
It's also what they say.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's not just that, though, because you could also, there's an instance that comes to my mind, and this is in a therapy setting. So I realize the context is different than a normal day-to-day thing. But as I'm sitting there listening to a couple the very first time I'm meeting them years ago, and they're explaining why they're here, because I usually start every session with, what's the most important thing to jump into, or how can I help you? What brings you here? In essence, let's jump right in. And they start talking, and I'm listening to them both use these glowing languages about how they're so into each other. Yet their body language is screaming the exact opposite, because they're leaning towards each other. They're fidgeting when somebody says something that's like, no, that's not accurate. And, they're reacting to each other in all these micro ways that are like, wait a second, there's something not aligned here. Your words are saying one thing, but your bodies are saying something else. And so that happens. And if they're one off, and that's an important distinction you're talking about, Pam, if there's just a couple of instances of that, that's life. I call you in the middle of work and I'm needing to talk to you about something, and you're quick and dismissive and whatever. And it's like, wait, that's context. If it's regular, that happens when hey, I got something I want to talk to you about. Oh, what? Okay. And that's nonstop. It's like, wait a second. I'm kind of getting the sense you don't really want to hear from me ever. So there's an element of realizing context makes a difference in this. And then I need to get better at, okay, if I start looking at what really is, what do I need to do about that? How do I get cleaner about that? And a lot of times I need to ask myself the questions of, okay, what am I avoiding because I just don't want the confrontation? What's the anxiety this is eliciting in me? What's the possibilities of this? How am I protecting myself?
That's a fair question. How am I protecting myself? That one would, I guess, speak to me wanting security, and security in a number of different ways.
Absolutely, because if I was to actually go down the thread of where could this lead? That's a unknown. And this is from way back. There was mention from a research study, I'm guessing is how they kind of came to it. There's a phrase that I can't remember how it all culminated into the statement, but it was basically, they were stating, we will choose unhappiness over uncertainty a majority of the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely, we will.
Because the uncertainty is, that really does freak me out. But in unhappiness, I know that at least.
Yeah.
That's the devil I know.
It's the devil I know, for sure. Well, and I don't know that we need to, or maybe we should. We haven't really talked about what the buts are. I know he loves me, or she loves me, but she disrespects me all the time.
Right. And
he pushes his way through all the time and doesn't listen to my side of the thing.
Right. And that's the idea of you're setting up your own self-doubt and then it basically excusing whatever is after the but. I couch it as I know they love me, but they're really stressed out. That's why they yell at me when they come home during the
Mm-hmm.
day. Or I know they love me, but they have real trouble with money, or they're impulsive or whatever. And it's like, hold on. You're using that as a way to soften or allow or excuse a behavior, which that's why we need to land in, okay, let's switch that. Love in action is a behavior. And so how out of line are some things in your life that you're
Yeah.
couching as, well, but they love me?
Yeah. And if you're ending up making a multitude of items that the behavior is not in line, you got to have these conversations. This isn't lining up. This isn't lining up.
And for yourself, this is pointing to, if you are the one saying this, like the email that came in, if you're the one recognizing I might say this, then it's often an underlying self-deception that's going on. It's a marital self-deception. I'm not willing to look at something, and I want to preserve a narrative that isn't in line with what I'm actually seeing. It's a way to buffer and avoid pain, which is interesting because I'm not actually avoiding pain. I'm just
No.
intensifying it eventually when it does come out.
Eventually.
That's that old adage of I can confront something now at the mouth of it, or I can do it later when it gets much more severe.
I'm down in the belly, man. There's all kinds of junk
do I
churning down
want to
there.
do first? I mean, do it as soon as you can, because it's easier. Still pain, but it's so much smaller than when it gets so much bigger.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at it. I mean, so it's asking kind of a question of, if they truly love me, would they keep treating me this way? Ask that question. Or even better, a question that's even more pointed. If this is what I accept as love, what does that say about my relationship with myself? Because we often accept being treated poorly in some areas of our life because that's the exact same thing I do with myself. I treat myself poorly. There is very little self-respect in some areas of my life, which is why I will tolerate it coming from other people. And if I can ask myself some questions to really confront the reality, I get a possibility of really shifting things back to on my shoulders, which is the differentiation route of really facing a better way forward. And then I can start looking at, okay, what does love mean to me in behavior? What would that actually mean? What did that actually look like? How do I show it? How am I in line?
Yeah, they may be saying the same thing about me.
They might.
Yeah. I think they love me, but
They might. But oftentimes what I have found, just a quick looking back inventory of clients where this has been a theme, oftentimes what I have found is the ones that will be more likely to say this to themselves to excuse things, it's because some of the aspects of the relationship dynamic is tilted in the other person's favor anyway. So they're getting in line with kind of what they want and a lot more, because the other person overfunctions